What is up, fight nerds and dirty gamblers? I am Erik. Welcome back to Erik Bets Fights. Tonight we're going to do our recap for UFC 270, Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane. We're going to go through the card, talk about the results of each fight, talk about each fight a little bit, and then we'll also kind of run through the bets that we had and how those went as we go through. My discussion of each fight is probably going to be pretty brief. I'm going to level with you here, folks. The reason I usually discuss the fights pretty briefly is because I have a neurodivergent brain that is weird, and I have a terrible short-term memory. So I always say, like, I'm not going to talk about each fight for very long, but that's really not so much by design as it is by necessity, because I can't remember that much about the fights. You can ask me anything about UFC 2 or UFC 6 or UFC 12, and I can tell you all about them because that's long-term memory stuff. But ask me about the fights I watched yesterday, I'm not going to remember a whole lot. So anyway, we're going to start at the bottom of the card this time. The first fight of the night was Hansen versus Jasmine, Jassoudavicius. My read here was that Hansen was going to be the better fighter everywhere, and that even though she was going to be the smaller fighter, that wasn't going to affect her as much. I heavily favored Hansen to win here, and my read was completely wrong on that one. Jassoudavicius, I mean, it wasn't like a total domination kind of thing or anything, but I mean, she won the fight pretty handily. If you watch my best bets video for this card, I mentioned on that video that I didn't have that many bets going into this card. But I also mentioned, I put that video out on Friday, and I also mentioned there's a good chance that on the morning of fight day, I'm going to end up taking a look and throwing some D-Gen action in there just to have a little bit more going on. And I did. I didn't put a whole lot down, but I put half a unit on a 5-fight parlay. I parlayed Hansen, Tony Gravely, Jack Della Madeleine, Matt Frivola, and Said Nurmagomedov. Hansen busted that parlay for me, so that was kind of a bummer. I had 5 fighters in that parlay. Hansen was the only one who didn't win. The parlay was at plus 551, and I had half a unit on that, so we lost half a unit there, but that's all right. I mean, obviously, when you're doing a 5-fight parlay, you definitely know that your odds of having that busted are pretty good, but I gave it a shot. It was a swing and a miss. Next fight up was Vanessa Demopolis versus Silvia Gomez Juarez. We didn't have any bets on that fight. However, on the best bet stream on DFS by the numbers, the bet that I gave out for that one was Vanessa Demopolis by sub. Oh, and also the best bet I gave out for the Hansen fight was Jasmine Jassoudavicius by a decision. Even though I favored Kay to win, I didn't like her money line, and I thought there was value on Jasmine to win by decision, which she did. So if I had actually bet the bets I suggested for these first 2 fights, I would have done pretty well. But I recommended Vanessa Demopolis by submission, which was at plus 400 when I had looked at it, and Vanessa Demopolis did win by decision. We didn't actually bet that, but here's the thing. I tried to bet it. I was on Bet Online, and I tried to bet it. I think it was literally like while one of the fighters, either Vanessa or Silvana, was already walking out to the cage, and I was like, I'm going to drop a little bit on this Demopolis by sub line, and I had it up and I tried to get it in, and they pulled the odds down before I had a chance to get it in. So it only would have been a couple bucks, but it would have been nice to hit that prop anyway. And it would have been untracked, obviously, because the event had already started, but even so. Next up, we had Matt Frivola versus Genaro Valdez. I think the bet that I recommended on this one was to bet Valdez in round 1. Let me check here. I think I said Valdez. Yeah, Valdez in round 1 by KO was at plus 800, which I didn't sprinkle on that. But, with the way the fight played out, even though that bet didn't hit, if this fight were to happen again, I would consider sprinkling that. I mean, look how it played out. It was Frivola who eventually got the upper hand and got the knockout, but could just as easily have been Valdez. I mean, Valdez had Frivola hurt in that crazy. And Frivola, I don't know how many they ended up crediting him with. I think the commentary said Frivola had 5 knockdowns. I don't know if they actually credited him with 5 or not, but if they did, I think 5 is the UFC record for a single fight. I'm not sure who it was, and I could be wrong about that. Y'all can fact check me. And I think 4 was the previous UFC record in 1 round, and that was Josh Emmett versus Felipe Colares. I can't remember for sure, but I think Josh Emmett had 4 knockdowns in a round. So assuming they did credit Frivola with 5, that should be a new UFC record, but I don't know if they did or not. Next up, Tony Gravely wins by unanimous decision versus Simon Oliveira. That was kind of a fun fight. We mentioned on the preview video, the Best Bets video, that Oliveira had something like 6 wins by guillotine, I think. And it's pretty clear after watching him in this performance that he really believes in that guillotine and he really works for that, possibly even to his detriment, like to the point that he doesn't really have a plan B. I mean, every time he didn't really fight the takedowns at all. I mean, Gravely was able to get him down whenever he wanted to, and it seems like Oliveira was more concerned with just grabbing that guillotine and being fine with being taken down as long as he had that guillotine position or was working for it, rather than actually trying to fight the takedown. So maybe that's something his coaches will work with him on, like, hey man, we know you got a good guillotine, but we might want to work on fighting these takedowns and not hanging out on our back, working for that choke. Next up was Jack Della Maddalena versus Pete Rodriguez. I loved this fight. I love Jack Della Maddalena. That kid he's freaking good. I mean, we saw how good he was on the Contender Series, and I think his performance here was even more impressive. I mean, further cemented how good he really looks. I mean, if you really watch, I mean, even if you don't really slow it down and look technique by technique, even just watching him in there, like I mentioned on the Best Bets video, there's just something about watching him in there where he's got that X factor. Just the way he moves, the way he sets traps, the way he throws his strikes. I think the kid's really good. The way he was using that jab to bait punches from Rodriguez, just pawing with the jab to bait strikes from Rodriguez so he could counter. His counters were really crisp, really on point. His timing was on point. I did see a few people saying that they thought Pete Rodriguez looked pretty good. I mean, I haven't gone back and watched the fight, and it could just be my biases because, like I said in the pre-fight video, I just don't really understand why Rodriguez is here. Based on the limited footage I could see on him, he just doesn't seem UFC caliber to me. And maybe it's just because I was carrying that bias into the fight, but I kind of still feel that way. After watching the fight, I was just kind of like, I don't really know why this kid's here. I mean, obviously he's finished a bunch of opponents. He's got power. Some people that I saw posting on Twitter mentioned that they thought he looked good, that they saw things in his game that they liked. So, there's probably something there that I'm just not seeing. But anyway, I'm excited to see what happens with Jack Della Maddalena next. Not so excited to see what happens with Pete Rodriguez next. Nothing against the guy. Next up was Victor Henry and Raoni Barcelos, and what a fight. Props to Narco Cop, I think it was, on the DFS by the Numbers Best Bet stream. Narco Cop, I think it was, who mentioned Victor Henry by decision was plus 900. I was taking notes during that. That's one of the ones I wrote down because those guys I feel really honored to be working with Brady from DFS by the Numbers and Narco Cop and Uncle Weezy. I'm learning a lot from those guys. Those guys have been doing this for a long time and they're very sharp, and it's really cool that they asked me to be a part of that. But yeah, so I'm like, even though I'm in there, working along with them as a co-host or a colleague or whatever you want to call it, I feel like I'm kind of a fanboy, like scribbling down their bets. Like, oh yeah, that's good stuff. Well, yeah, I wrote down that Victor Henry by decision at plus 900. And then when I went to try to play it, it was at plus 700. I mean, it's probably still value there, but I ended up deciding not to play it for that reason. But yeah, I mean, pretty much everybody was on Raoni Barcelos here for good reason, we thought. But I didn't have any bets on him, but I mean, his money line was at like minus 440, which I wasn't going to touch that. Victor Henry was at like plus 360. And I did say that I thought there was value on that line, but I still ended up not playing it. But I did see a few people on Twitter who did play it. Big ups to them because that was really sharp. But yeah, Victor Henry, obviously the guy already had 26 pro fights going into this. He's already fought some pretty good fighters. I mean, he's been fighting over in Japan for a long time. He's not the kind of guy who was going to have necessarily a lot of UFC jitters, a lot of big show jitters. He's already fought in bigger shows and stuff. And yeah, he came in there looking every bit the vet, the well-traveled, well-schooled vet that he was. His boxing looked great. His durability looked great. His cardio looked great. That was just a really fun fight. So yeah, it'll be cool to see what they do with Victor Henry next. That kid, he belongs, to say the least. Good on him. Next up was Michael Morales versus Trevin Giles. We did have a bet on this fight. I put 1 unit on this fight to not go the distance at plus 120. So, I mean, that hit easily, of course. I did see a lot of people on Giles. I saw some people on Morales as well. My read pre-fight was that it was pretty. I mean, I mostly agreed with the odds. It was pretty close to a coin flip. I thought, I mean, Morales looks like he's got the goods, but also he's 22 years old, big step up in competition, first time in the big show, etc. But Morales didn't look fazed at all by his age, his relative experience being in the big show. Didn't look fazed at all. Kid looked super good, and especially at only 22, like it's going to be cool to see what happens with him because, I mean, when you're looking that good at 22, what are you going to look like at 25 and then at 30 and like yeah, so. And Trevin Giles, I mean, I don't know, what does that guy do next? You know, he's fought all the way up at light heavyweight, I think, hasn't he? And then, you know, spent a decent amount of his career at middleweight. Now dropped all the way down to 170, and I think 170 is good for him. I mean, I remember watching Trevin Giles in middleweight fights and always thinking that he's not that big of a guy. You know, I mean, he's tall, but he's fairly thin and. At 185, he always carried, not like he's chubby or anything, but he always did have a little bit of a spare tire around the waist. I remember always thinking like, yeah, I think this guy could drop down. And he did. He looked good. He looked healthy. I mean, his physique looked good at 170. Bummer that he wasn't able to get the win in his first fight there. But, yeah, we'll see what he decides to do next. Does he stick around at 170? Does he go back up? I don't know. Next fight, Said Nurmagomedov versus Cody Stamen. A lot of people were on Cody Stamen here, and I can understand why. I think the bet I recommended on the Best Bets show was Cody Stamen by decision, which was at like plus 250. Well, I didn't end up playing that. Luckily, I didn't. I did lean Said to win here, which he did very quickly. I think it was like 40-some seconds. It was a masterful performance from Said. I should have rewatched that before this video here so I could have remembered the details, but I think he landed a punch and then he landed like a spinning back kick and then he grabbed that kind of modified guillotine. But yeah, really really impressive performance. Takes out Cody Stamen, finishes him in 42 seconds or something like that it was. Very cool. I like Said. That dude's fun to watch. He's got solid skills, but also just like exciting skills. You know, he does fun things. He's always doing spinning back kicks and spinning back fists, and he's really quick with that stuff, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. Next up, we've got Michel Pereira, Demolidor versus Andre Fiorio. I saw a lot of people on Fiorio here too, and with the way the fight played out, I don't think that was a bad bet. I mean, there were moments where Fiorio was definitely getting the better of the striking with Pereira. I was looking on SureDog. I don't know about you guys, but I love reading the SureDog play-by-plays. Even if I watch the fights, I like to read the SureDog play-by-plays anyway. But okay, so all three SureDog judges scored round 1 for Fiorio, scored round 2 for Pereira, scored round 3 for Pereira. So yeah, that's what was kind of crazy about this fight, because if you think about the way Michel Pereira fights, if I told you Michel Pereira fought a 3-round fight to a decision, and he only won one of those rounds, which round did he win? You're going to guess it was round 1, right? Because that's just the way Michel Pereira fights. He comes out crazy. He's using all of his movement and all of his energy in round 1, and then he tends to slow down. He's gotten to a point where he manages his energy better. He doesn't slow down as much as he used to, but still, round 1 is kind of where Michel Pereira tends to butter his bread, and we didn't see that here. We saw Fiorio having a lot of success in round 1, and Pereira was able to kind of bring that vet lesson a little bit. He was able to, I mean, it wasn't a super stellar, impressive performance by any means, but he was able to, keep his cardio up pretty well. He was able to maintain composure. He was able to maintain his output and win a decision. So it's cool to see. Next up, we had Davison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. That fight was crazy fun. I was having so much fun. I was sitting in the living room watching on my laptop with my headphones on, and my wife was sitting on the couch watching something on the TV. And during that fight, she kept being like, "What? What?" Because I was freaking out. I was standing up and cheering, and that was just a really fun fight. I mean, how could it not be, right? But yeah, so third fight between those guys, and I think the prevailing thought after that fight was, let them do it again. I mean, why not, right? Technically, they're 1-1-1. Moreno won one of them, Figueiredo won one of them, and one of them was technically a draw. So that's still a tie. Yeah, and I mean, I ended up thinking after that fight, like, you could just let these two guys fight every 3 months for the rest of their careers, and I would be totally fine with that because they make for a great fight. But one thing I wanted to bring up here, again, going back to, I don't know if y'all look at SureDog. I didn't start using Tapology until like a year or two ago. I have always been a SureDog Fight Finder guy, big SureDog guy. But anyway, I like to look at the play-by-plays they do and see how the SureDog judges score things. But this is just kind of testament to how crazy and dynamic and difficult to score this fight was. So round one SureDog judge had it for Figueiredo, 2 of them had it for Moreno. Round 2 for Moreno and 1 for Figueiredo, just like round 1, but not the same. It was a different person who scored it for Figueiredo the second time, so it wasn't like a bias thing necessarily. Round 3, all 3 SureDog judges gave it to Figueiredo. Round 4, 2 for Figueiredo, 1 for Moreno. And round 5, all 3 for Figueiredo again. So we end up with 2 48-47 Figueiredos, 1 49-46. The official judges had it, unanimous decision. All 3 of them had it 48-47 for Figueiredo. And, you know, it was nice to see Figueiredo come back and look as good as he did here after that performance in the second fight. I mean, he did come out and say that was a weight cut thing. But, you know, there was definitely, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one who was thinking this. I mean, it was in the back of my mind, which is why I didn't end up betting on this fight, because I just thought there were too many question marks. I thought, you know, okay, yeah, it was a bad weight cut, but was it a bad weight cut that was the result of issues that are going to continue to plague him? Is he going to have another bad weight cut? Is it because of his age? Is it because of something else? I mean, obviously he moved to fight ready here and worked with Henry Cejudo. A lot of times we do see a rejuvenation in a fighter because of a camp change, but not always. Sometimes we see regression. Sometimes we see worse things happen because they've changed camps. You know, changing camps doesn't automatically mean you're going to fix the issues that have been plaguing you, but it looks like in the case of Davis and Figueiredo, he may have moved in the direction of dealing with some of the issues that plagued him for that second fight. And then finally, the main event of the evening, a clash between 2 of the greatest heavyweight combatants that we've ever seen in this sport. And so this was my weird hedge out situation where I bet 3 units. I'm really glad I ended up doing this because of the way it played out. I bet 3 units on Cyril Gane when he was at minus 110, so pretty early on. And then that line moved quite a bit. I think he was up to like minus 160, minus 170. I could be wrong about that, but around there. And then Francis Ngannou was at plus 135. So, and I changed my read. After doing more tape study, I ended up deciding that I leaned Ngannou to win. So I hedged out on that and guaranteed myself a little bit of profit because of that line movement. So that was kind of, I'm glad that I ended up doing that. It's the first time I've ever done a hedge out like that. Sometimes I have trouble with being indecisive and pulling the trigger on things like that. So I was like looking at it and I was like, well, do I want to do that? I should just leave it alone. Don't hedge out. But anyway, I'm proud of myself for ending up making that decision because it did pay off. But then I also put a half unit because my read, obviously, even though Ngannou won, the fight didn't play out the way my read told me it was going to. I really thought Ngannou was going to be able to clip him at some point and find that finish. So I did also put a half unit on Ngannou by TKO at plus 170. Oh, and I did sprinkle, I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the K. Hansen fight. I did sprinkle 0.1 unit on Hansen to win in round 3, which was at plus 1,000, which that didn't hit. But anyway, let's get back to the Francis and Cyril fight. So what we saw there was the performance we saw from Cyril Gane is what we expected, what I expected. You know, I've been saying for a while, and I still stick with this viewpoint. I think that when everything is said and done, Cyril Gane is probably going to be the greatest heavyweight that we've ever seen. He's still only 31, which at heavyweight, I mean, he could still have a decade of a career in front of him, being 31. He's only a few years into training MMA, fighting MMA professionally. He's still pretty new to the sport. I can't remember exactly. I've heard he's only been training MMA 3 years. I don't know if that's accurate. It might be a little longer than that. But anyway, it's not very long in the scheme of things. And so the athleticism that we see from him, obviously the movement, the striking skills we see from him, and also, well, we can talk about that. The fight IQ most of the time. There's a lot of arguing going on Twitter today about whether he did or didn't try to drop for a heel hook in round 5. I'm not going to get into that here, but anyway, we see a lot of wisdom and fight IQ and decision making from Ciryl Gane that belies someone with only a few years of MMA training and only a few years of fighting at the highest level. I do think he's a very special athlete. I do think he's a special fighter and a special heavyweight, and I don't think the fact that he lost here changes that. And Francis is a very special heavyweight too, even more special than we thought, which we saw from this performance. Shout out to Liam Picks Fights, as he did mention in his write-up. People were saying, oh, nobody saw that Francis was going to come out and wrestle. Well, props to Liam, because Liam did mention that in his write-up. He said Francis has underrated wrestling skills that we might end up seeing here. And so, yeah, if the fight had played out on the feet the way we expected it to, Ciryl Gane was handily winning that fight and likely would have continued to. My read was that Francis was going to be able to find the big shot and knock him out. It seemed to me like something was wrong with Francis right from the start. And obviously we did hear that he had some sort of knee injury, his ACL or MCL or both, and he was going to need surgery. He had those knee braces on. Francis just didn't seem to have the movement and the explosiveness that he normally has. And maybe that's why he and Erik Nixick created the wrestling heavy game plan here. Maybe they realized, because allegedly this knee thing had been going on for like a few weeks at least, if not longer. So, maybe they decided to use some wrestling here, because if it had played out on the feet, Francis was not going to find that knockout. He wasn't even coming close. He just wasn't really landing much of anything. So I had already decided, because of my hedge, I was going to win a little bit either way, so it didn't matter. But I wanted to hit that little bit that I sprinkled on the KO prop for Francis too. Yeah, I was pretty sure Francis was not going to win this fight. Even when we saw him start wrestling, I think it was round 3 when he first started wrestling, even when we saw that happen, I still didn't think he was going to win. I was like, oh, he got a takedown. Cool. I didn't think he was going to be able to consistently keep doing that, or that he would necessarily go to that and consistently. And he did. So big ups to Francis for coming out with that kind of game plan, sticking to it, showing the growth in his game, showing the maturity in his game, showing that he can be a well-rounded mixed martial artist. He's not just a freak athlete that needs to get the knockout. He showed a complete MMA game here, and the ability to stick to and implement a game plan where he needs to use different parts of his game and change his focus and that sort of thing in order to beat an opponent where his normal tactics aren't working. So big ups to Francis for that. Big ups to Ciryl Gane for being the fighter that we thought he was. I mean, he wasn't able to deal with the wrestling. He knows that he's got some issues to shore up there. We know that. I think everybody knows that Ciryl Gane is not a great grappler, not a great wrestler. It's clearly something he's working on. We've seen him get submissions before, so he's not a complete fish out of water. But, he's 31 years old. He's got the abilities that he has, the mind that he has, the team that he has behind him. He's not going anywhere. He's going to go back to the drawing board. He's going to work on shoring up and fixing the issues that we saw in this fight. He's going to be back, and I still think that he's going to end up going down as the greatest heavyweight of all time. Let's go ahead and take a quick run through the bets that we had again. We had that 3 units on Ciryl Gane at minus 110, ended up hedging out with 2.4 units on Francis Ngannou at plus 135. So altogether, we pick up 0.24 units of profit there. We had 1 unit on Michael Morales and Trevin Giles, doesn't go the distance, at plus 120, so we get 1.2 units out of that. I put that 0.5 on that big parlay. Hansen lost. Other than that, though, Tony Gravely, Jack Dilla, Madeleine, Matt Frivola, and Said Nurmagomedov all won, so we came close to hitting that one, but you know how it is in parlays. Horseshoes and hand grenades and all that, how many Las Vegas was built on big ass parlays where he only lost one leg. So that, that's not a big deal. We had that half unit on Ngannou to win by KO or TKO at plus 170. We lost that one. And then we had a 0.1 unit sprinkle on Hansen in round 3 at plus 1,000. We lost that one. So it ended up being only a very, very tiny win. We had 7.5 units put out total. We won 0.34 units. But hey, folks, we're in the green on this one. A win is a win. I will take it. That puts us at a total, since we started tracking on betmma.tips, started tracking on October 9th, so it's just been a few months still. That puts us at a total of 46.19 units of profit at an ROI of 29%. So, yeah, that's two events in 2022, and we've won both of them. Kind of smaller wins. We're sitting at about 4.3 units total on the year, something like that. But that's okay. I'm feeling good about that. I mean, I haven't found spots that I super loved on these last couple cards, and I try to be a very careful gambler. I try to, like I said, a lot of times on the day of, I end up kind of making a couple little dumb sprinkles and that sort of thing. But as far as anything that I'm actually putting, a full unit or numerous units on, I try to be really careful and make sure I have a really strong read and I feel really good about it. And I just haven't really had that so much these last couple events, so that's okay. I already started tape study for the next event, February 5th, so you'll be hearing more from me on that. I already have one bet on it, in fact, so feeling good about that. Thanks so much for stopping by, folks. If you have any comments for me, any questions, anything you want me to do videos on or break down, put that in the comments down there. If you can please like this video and subscribe to my channel, I would appreciate that very much. I'm still new to this content creation game, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm planning on continuing to make videos, hoping to grow the channel, hoping to grow my reach a little bit and find more opportunities for myself in this space. As always, I am Erik with Erik Bets Fights, reminding you to play it smart, play it tight. Let's grow those bankrolls. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Have a good one.